Chapter 1-3, Creationism and Other Theories. I'll start this section with a few excellent quotes. They belong to the already mentioned researchers who enjoy undisputed authority. Richard Dawkins, professor from Oxford and the most active supporter and propagandist of Darwin's ideas. Biology is the study of complicated things that have the appearance of having been designed with a purpose. Yet the living results of natural selection overwhelmingly impress us with the illusion of design and planning. Francis Crick, discoverer of the DNA structure, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. Michael Behe, Darwin's Black Box. Imagine a room in which a body lies crushed, flat as a pancake. A dozen detectives crawl around, examining the floor with magnifying glasses for any clue to the identity of the perpetrator. In the middle of the room, next to the body, stands a large gray elephant. The detectives carefully avoid bumping into the pachyderm's legs as they crawl and never even glance at it. Over time, the detectives get frustrated with their lack of progress, but resolutely press on, looking even more closely at the floor. You see, textbooks say detectives must get their man, so they never consider elephants. There is an elephant in the room full of scientists who are trying to explain the development of life. The elephant is labeled intelligent design. Please keep in mind that the book you are reading is not about creationism or intelligent design in their usual sense. I have great respect for the adherents of creationism and the supporters of the hypothesis of intelligent design, especially since the citadel of the latter, the Discovery Institute, is located close to my house, and I have the honor of being acquainted with its leading staff. What is creationism, and how does it differ from intelligent design? Wikipedia defines creationism as a religious belief that the universe and life originated from specific acts of divine creation. The intelligent design describes itself as a scientific research program led by a community of scientists, philosophers, and other scholars who seek evidence of design in nature. Some people think that there is no difference. The intelligent creator and God, they insist, is the same. Legislators in the Western world are along with this view. In persistence of the truth, they found nothing better than prohibiting the teaching of any alternative to evolutionary theory view in schools. The European Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, the enforcement agent of democracy, adopted Resolution number 1580, The Danger of Creationism in Education. It states, the intelligent design idea, which is the latest, most refined version of creationism, does not deny a certain degree of evolution. However, intelligent design, presented in a subtler way, seeks to portray its approach as scientific, and there lies the danger. What is this terrible danger that cannot be allowed at European schools? Let us start with creationists, that is, people who openly acknowledge God's intervention in the emergence and formation of life. This movement is also heterogeneous and is divided into two influential groups, the young earthers and the old earthers. The first breed follows a purely biblical point of view and believes that the age of the earth does not exceed 10,000 years, and best of all, that it is equal to 7,526 years. Why this particular figure? This is how the experts of the Old Testament calculated that, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then God created mankind in his own image. After these acts, the patriarchs from Adam to Jacob are listed in detail, indicating the duration of their age. Then there was the Exodus, the Babylonian captivity, one number was added to another, and so the final figure came out. And who can dispute this? It looks like there are no historical records or structures older than this date. Even Chinese civilization sources never claimed longer periods than 6,000 years. I watched dozens of hours of video lectures on the theme of the young earth and was impressed by the strict and meticulous arguments of the speakers. They fearlessly enter disputes with university professors, eminent geologists, and paleontologists, proving that the earth is young. Creator produced all living creatures at once in the forms in which they exist today. Young earthers master scientific material and convincingly prove that people were contemporaries of dinosaurs. Their bones and traces were found together, and that radiocarbon methods of analysis are unreliable. Formulas and graphs follow. In general, I am not at all inclined to call them stubborn fools because they are not. Meanwhile, one of the favorite techniques used by evolutionary scientists in a dispute with creationists is the following. Evolutionist, and tell us, do you believe that the Earth's age is less than 10,000 years old? Answer me yes or no. Creationist. Yes, I believe that this is so, based on my knowledge and belief. Evolutionist. Proudly throwing his hands up and triumphantly looking at the hall. The audience. Offensive laughter. Applause. Meanwhile, the young earthers are very clever people, and they are subtly exposing the whole falsity of the theory of evolution. But who will take them seriously after such an answer? The evolutionist wins the fight without giving a single argument. Dispute is over. Science won. Old earthers agree that the Bible is a valuable historical source and a storehouse of all sorts of wisdom, but it should not be perceived literally, rather as a work full of allegory. So 6 days of creation meant not 6 intervals of 24 hours, but simply periods of indefinite duration. Old earthers agree with the age of the earth, measured in billions of years. They do not insist that all life has been created immediately and forever. They readily admit that the biological world underwent evolution, but God, in their opinion, took part in the creation of new beings. This view is in very good agreement with the punctuated equilibria theory, supported by a significant number of evolutionists. French naturalist Georges Cuvier even proposed a catastrophic theory, according to which God repeatedly created new species in place of those destroyed by natural disasters. There are many more scientific facts supporting the old earthers than evolutionists have in their bag. Indeed, everything that paleontologists found in sedimentary rocks are fully formed species. If there was a continuous evolution in nature, the number of species would be infinitely large due to constant transitioning from one form to another. After all, the transition between organisms is accomplished by microscopic steps. Accordingly, the number of intermediate species should have been gigantic, but they were not found despite the persistent assurances of Darwin's supporters. The new discoveries of microbiologists and geneticists, oddly enough, pour water on the creationists' mill and cause new headaches for evolutionists. At present, it is clear that for the transition from one species to another, a huge number of simultaneous and synchronized changes should be produced in the body, the same way as in the restructuring of the radio receiver into a tape recorder. Gradual changes can only cause that the receiver stops working, the computer program will not be responding, and the animal falls ill or dies. Creationism explains its case simply and logically. God came, saw that it was bad, removed the old, built a new one, and proclaims, "That is good." For example, the Creator discovered that his beloved dinosaurs do not live to his expectations. They are gluttonous, hurt, dull, do not behave. He created mammals as an alternative. Then God removed the dinosaurs from the face of the earth and saw that it was good. Life without dinosaurs is better indeed. The strength of the creationism, especially of the old earthers, is that it is an indestructible concept. If God exists and he created all life, how can you refute it? You have no weapon against creationism. In addition, creationism is a moral concept. If there is a God, there are his laws. Laws should be followed, and the main one of them says that one should love anyone as yourself. Atheism, creationists believe, does not teach morality. There is nothing in it that prescribes to love one's neighbor, and worse, one's enemy. But as a saying goes, if everybody loves you, someone does not like it. Creationism is very disliked by materialistic scientists. Its main sin is that it is not a scientific teaching. Recollect once again what is science. It is such a field of human activity that exists within the framework of strict rules and dogmas of materialism. People who voluntarily lock themselves in the materialistic cage poke their fingers at those outside and laugh loudly. "Oh, look at those fools got out. Such the assholes." And what about the theory of the origin of life and its development over several billion years? Again, they beat professional Darwinists like babes. Why should creationists have a theory? Why explain or reason when everything is in God's hands? They are invincible. However, they are also in vain in their worldview, but more on this will follow later. Now, we go to a relatively new concept called intelligent design. Amazingly, the term intelligent design may be found in Thomas Aquinas in his fifth proof of the existence of God. The modern intelligent design movement was formed in the 80s of the last century. Most of its founders are still doing well, feel good, and lead an active lifestyle. One of them, a famous lawyer and the most intelligent person, Philip Johnson, announced the goal of the movement as a scientific concept of creationism. The headquarters of ID is Discovery Institute in Seattle, and its fellows are all PhDs in various fields: biology, mathematics, philosophy, etc. Among them are Christians and Jews, agnostics, and Muslims. Employees of the Institute conduct seminars, conferences, organize summer training camps, issue their own journals, and publish books. Unlike creationists, the concept of intelligent design does not have a direct statement that God creates all living things. They allow other possibilities, such as panspermia, visits of aliens, a creative force that exists independently somewhere in the universe. Surprisingly, creationists who preach unconditional love for their close and distant neighbors have not been very happy about the new neighborhood. In 2006, the director of the Vatican Observatory, the Jesuit astronomer George Coyne, condemned ID as a kind of crude creationism, which reduced God to a mere engineer. Hugh Ross, a proponent of old Earth creationism, believes that the efforts of the intelligent design proponents to divorce the concept from biblical Christianity make its hypothesis too vague. In 2002, he wrote, "Winning the argument for design without identifying the designer yields, at best, a sketchy origins model." The scientific community, too, did not rush to embrace new colleagues. On the contrary, they are boycotting ID proponents. ID articles are not accepted in peer-reviewed journals. None of the conferences, except for those held under the auspices of the Discovery Institute, admit ID reports. Nevertheless, Michael Behe's book, Darwin's Black Box, Stephen Mayer's The Signature in the Cell, and Philip Johnson's Darwin on the Trial are published in large numbers and are bought actively. The advantages of the intelligent design, his adepts believe, are obvious. Evolution is pointless, goes very slowly, if at all, and is too costly for nature. It is like an attempt to build a tape recorder by trial and error process. The intelligent design has a clear goal, is implemented economically, without unnecessary sacrifices and expenditures, and can be carried out very quickly, theoretically, within one generation. The main drawback of this concept is that it is not clear who created the intelligent designer. Maybe, Russian biologist Ilya Roklenko reflects, no external designer has anything to do with it at all, and instead, the organisms direct their evolution in the direction they want, stimulated by internal, vitalistic forces, the nature of which we just do not understand yet. I would like the reader to remember this remarkable insight of Dr. Roklenko, the dean of the Faculty of Ecology of the Volsky University. If it turned out to be true, then we have our cake and eat it too. Let us see how close the Russian biologists got to solving this urgent problem. The materialist scholar immediately exclaims, "Aha! Vitalistic forces. Everything is clear with you. This is not science." Do not rush with a conclusion, dear opponent. Vitalism, by common definition, is an immaterial force. That is true. But does it necessarily have to be supernatural? Can you imagine something immaterial, virtual, inherent only to living organisms, but having quite a material base and influence on matter? An example of such a phenomenon may be information. Did you participate in hypnosis sessions, at least as a spectator? Remember how it was conducted? The hypnotized person falls under the power of the medium and begins to produce quite material actions, to sit down, get up, pour water, crow, submitting to intangible commands. Or take a remotely controlled aircraft model. Such a model flies and performs different patterns, each model flying simultaneously, following only to the coded command to which it is configured. No one pushes the model with a pole or twists it on a rope. Intangible information controls it. Oh no, the educated reader would continue. The model is controlled by radio, and radio waves are material. It is true, but the waves do not push the model and do not turn it. Carrier of waves and control code is material, but the code itself is not. So the vitalistic forces, if we expand this concept, should be held in the material body. This body can be their keeper and source. In this case, the creator can be inside, not outside of the living organism. There is no doubt that any living organism is a storehouse of information. We have already described how much information is stored in every cell, in every gene, every molecule of DNA and RNA. Millions and billions of bits. But is it possible to imagine that this information played a creative role in the creation of new organisms? According to the view of geneticists, DNA is just a drawing according to which the proteins are constructed and then make up a living organism. But how can a drawing become the creator? Late Israeli physicist and microbiologist Ishel Ben Jacob proposed a similar view on the development of life and the evolutionary processes in it. Observing the behavior of the colonies of bacteria, he concluded that evolutionary progress is not a result of successful accumulation of mistakes, but is rather the outcome of designed creative processes in the genome. Progress happens when organisms are exposed to paradoxical environmental conditions, conflicting external constraints that force the organism to respond in contradicting manners. Clearly, an organism cannot do it within its current framework. The new picture of creative cooperative evolution is based on the cybernetic capacity of the genome and the emergence of creativity as the solution cooperative complex systems apply to an existential paradox. The cells, Ben Jacob believes, communicate with each other through chemical signals and can exchange gene material, thus producing a collective evolution. He created an interesting concept based on an analysis of Gödel's classical theorem. In his opinion, Gödel's condition imposed on any system can be reduced to the following conclusion. A system cannot self-design another system which is more advanced than itself. The bacterium cannot build a more complex bacterium. The unicellular is unable to create a multicellular. Simple computer unable to build a supercomputer without outside help. But, the professor argues, the system consisting of trillions of bacteria surpasses in complexity a single bacterium and can produce a more complex organism. For example, bacteria that successfully confront the most sophisticated antibiotics. In his observations, Ben Jacob concluded that synchronized autocatalytic and cooperative genetic variations in the colony are possible, both spontaneous and responding to changes in the environment. To the most valuable thoughts of Ben Jacob, I would refer to the ability of the colony of bacteria to preserve information about past environmental conditions, long-term memory, as well as assess the ability of the genome and the cybernetic potential of the colonies to act as a super mind. As an observed example of the formation of a new species, it results in the ability of the colony of bacteria to sporulate. In severe conditions of lack of nutrients or changes in environmental conditions, bacteria can form spores and wait for dashing times. American biologist James Shapiro also believed that the genome in many respects resembles a computer. But if we assume that the multitude of microorganisms, a colony, have their own intelligence, what would cause them to come up with a vertical leap into different organisms? For example, multicellular. What would be the purpose of this transformation? Who and why invented the algorithm of constant changes that took place over billions of years? Let us summarize the section. There is a hypothesis about some higher power, be it the god or the gods or aliens or something unknown to us. This power creates and then develops life forms from the simplest into higher varieties. This seemingly irrefutable hypothesis has at least 4 serious objections. First objection, it belongs to the category of so-called deferred solutions. It, in fact, explains nothing. Let us presume that there is the God. He is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. But where did he come from? Who or what created him? We do not know this. And since he is unknowable in principle, and as frequently said, he moves in a mysterious way, we will never know. You can reconcile with this idea, as true believers do, and give up forever an attempt of knowing. But some people would want to know. Do you? I would, and very much so. If he exists and has endowed with us life after death, if after the death of the physical body an indefinite non-material future waits for us, then one be better to prepare himself for this being. What do I have to do in life to make this future brighter and pleasant, not full of suffering in the hell with sticky boiling tar? And how do you know this without getting into the heart of the matter? Any man, even a faithful believer, would not refuse if someone shed light on this foggy future and equally vague presence. Aliens are another example of the deferred solutions, as well as panspermia and the unknown, but powerful intelligent designer. Until we know where the life came from and according to what laws it develops, there will be no peace to our seditious souls. As Philip Johnson said in one of his lectures, I do not understand why everyone does not talk about only one thing, about the source and development of life. It's so incredibly interesting. I too find this insanely interesting and sincerely the only subject worthy of attention. If we find out the meaning of our existence and what is the secret of our origin, all life can go in a different direction. Second objection: if the Creator exists, he is immeasurably better than any lower, insignificant life form, including humans. He is smarter, has all the virtues. He is a wise and self-sufficient being. He has everything. He is good by himself. He does not need anything. Question: why in the heaven would he need us? We who consider ourselves the crown of creation, in fact, represent a bunch of vices, the whitewashed tombs. Throughout all our history, we are fighting, killing, deceiving, and robbing each other. All other living beings are engaged in the same activity. They hunt, devour the weakest, spawn, and increase in numbers, having no other visible goal in life. Does he need this existence? The creationists are silent to this question, and I suspect they are not even looking for the answer. Objection 3. Let us say the Creator is present and he, as the religious tradition tells us, is omnipotent. Why did he, being almighty, spend billions of years creating more or less attractive wildlife specimens? We, insignificant mortals, are progressing much faster. People figured out the structure of DNA just 70 years ago. We know about the existence of genes for a little more than a century. But scientists have already figured out the entire genome and are rapidly making new and new advances. It will take another couple of decades, when in laboratories and later in the workshops, we will begin to grow man-made unicellular and then more complex organisms. What is 100 years compared to the several billion that the Creator had at his disposal? How did it happen that we are so ahead of him in the pace of development? And the fourth: if he is so omnipotent, why is his creation such imperfect life? Why has our human society not built a fair and happy world in its entire history? Do you want to know the answers to these questions? Follow me, the listener. It should be noted that in most of the above statements and negations, I am not alone. One of the main pillars of Darwinism, natural selection, is increasingly being questioned by the experts. Remove this pillar, and the whole theory of evolution falls apart. If you believe F. Dobzhansky, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, then without natural selection, all the biology would collapse, for it will be, according to Dobzhansky, a meaningless enterprise. But the professor of anthropology and genetics, Kenneth Wise, told the stunned interviewer, natural selection, most of the time, appears to be a very weak force. In other words, the difference between the favored and less favored genes is very slight at any given time, and that makes it difficult at any time to identify what is better and what is worse in evolutionary terms, and even more difficult looking backwards in time to try to identify how that process worked in detail. The reporter replied, "It's surprising you say natural selection appears to be a very weak force. Professor, the examples that we see on television and in textbooks are examples of very strong natural selection, such as pesticide resistance, or the selection of colored moss against trees that birds can see or can't see. Things like that are exaggerated examples, and they tend to give an impression of selection as generally being much stronger than the genetic evidence suggests that it usually is. I want to reassure readers with my solid and unbreakable presumption: evolution exists. It goes in a natural way, but at the same time, it has an intelligent guiding force, and we will try to understand the nature of this force to the full extent.